Welcome, everybody. Tuesday. Welcome to another installment of the weekly Taco Tuesday Talks with Tikal about Tikor. Roll that however you want to. I know it's kind of a crazy title, but it kind of stuck and I kind of like it, so we're just going to keep rocking with that. Still playing around with this whole mic video setup, so eventually one day you'll see me all fancy green screen and you won't see all this stuff in the background, but for the moment you'll have to deal with that. Alright, I guess we'll give people a minute to come in. I know it's been, I think I skipped the last week's because I forgot. Like, there's this weird thing that happens when you start to work for yourself. Like, you end up forgetting what days it is, you know? Like, you think it's a Wednesday, or in my case, I don't know, I thought it was Monday or Sunday. And I was like, nope, surprise, it is Tuesday, and you missed your stream. One job, bro. So, I'm gonna start working on getting these stream schedules back up to snuff and getting them on the regular. No excuse on my part. I'm just getting used to the whole stream on the regular. And plus, I've been having to do like a lot more like background stuff and getting like the studio together in like a paperwork way, which that is its own bag of issues sometimes, you know. So, but all that's going good though. So I think I can officially say I'm like official. So like Swordsfall Studios LLC is a thing. I got that paperwork back, so not much changes as far as like viewers or customers or anything. But on my end, it's a little bit more official. So I got to get things set up and all that good business stuff and get ready for tax time and yay. And I'm working on trying to get this Chronicles of Swordsfall book out that I promised by the end of the month. And I kind of got sidetracked with the structural stuff. But I'm almost done fleshing out the stuff I want to do, and then I just got to send it over to one of my editors and then let them do that. And then my goal with the Amazon book, and we'll see if people like it, but I know a lot of books tend to feel really I feel like the reason why people sometimes give like indie guys like a bad rep on Amazon and whatnot is because they just throw like a PDF and they put it in like the standard font and then throw it out there. And so what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to make it way more like interactive. Well, no, I mean not interactive in like an actual playing it sense, but I want it to feel more of a story-ish book. So we might have a little pieces of art in it. We'll see. I might see if I can jazz it up to still have it feel like an ebook and have it be, the typical stuff people like. So, what's up, Ash? How are you? Good to see you. Alright. Guess we'll give... I never know how long to give people to show up. Like, typically I should just start immediately. I don't know. Do people start immediately or do they wait and chat for a minute? I never know how these things work. So. Which, I've been using Bandcamp lately. I really like it. So if anybody is working on their own project and they have like questions on organization, I can start to help out with some of that stuff as I work to find like projects and stuff that work for me. Programs or whatnot. Hey, what up, Bree? Congrats on being awake. Thank you, Ash. I'm always glad to see other people's projects going well as well. It's weird to think that my like weird passion has kind of rubbed off on people, which is nice. Like, I never thought of myself as that kind of person, so it's kind of weird. But I dig it. So, can everybody hear me over the music and all that good stuff? Because I can adjust the volume. Like, that's the thing I hate too. Like, I can never tell based on like what it shows me in my end how loud or soft it is. So, and my voice goes up and down. I know sometimes it can be loud, sometimes it can be soft. I have no idea why. My voice modulation has always been weird. It's an inflection pretty thing. Alright. it's 5 minutes in, so I guess we'll consider this started. So, happy Tuesday, everybody. Make sure you get some tacos afterwards, as is said tradition. And, yeah. So, I feel like today I'm going to talk a little bit about war in Tikor, and then take questions as always. Throw them in the chat, and then hit me in at Swordsfall. That way I know I can pay attention. I have a tendency to like start to look at what I'm doing, and then I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, people had questions and shit. I can't hear music, you're a tiny bit lower than usual, but I have headphones and they go on other people. Oh, that's fine. I would rather you hear my voice than the music anyway, so I consider that a win. Let's see. What war should I start with? Should I just start with, So war is always an interesting thing. I typically don't try to jump straight to like a huge conflict. Only because people have the tendency to only think about a world in terms of its conflicts. And Swordsfall is more than like a mix of those things, you know? Like I want it to feel like a world where, like, yeah, things happen, but it's not necessarily just all fighting, all conflict, all the time. That's one of those things that I feel like personally gets kind of annoying. So I try hard not to do it myself. But conflict makes a story. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So we're going to start off with talking about probably one of the biggest wars I have in my world. And it's one of the ones that some wars, you know, are like a major flashpoint. They're like the things that really change things for a country or a place of origin. You know, like for us, World War I, World War II will always be those, especially World War II, will be those conflicts that you can always trace things back to it. That's why it comes up so often. And in my world, that war is a little bit more recent than something like World War II. It's actually a two-part battle, but the one everybody really remembers, the part that they talk about, is the longest night. So basically, there was two halves to a major conflict. The first half is called the Day of Reckoning, and the second half is called the Longest Night. And I'll throw this here in chat for the link to the Longest Night, if you want to read that. I'm not gonna like necessarily read through it, but I'll give you basically a synopsis. And actually, the opening line is pretty good too. When a day of reckoning falls into the longest night, Tikor's largest battle to date ends with a mysterious explosion. Mysterious explosion? Yes, indeed. So the first thing to know, and this is one of the articles that I really introduced you to at first, was that a full day cycle is longer on Tikor than it is on Earth. So a full day is about 38 hours. And in this case, this conflict takes place during the winter solstice. So basically when the nights are especially long. So basically during this point in the story, this point in the myth or whatnot, the nightfall lasts for 26 hours. So when they mean the longest night, they really do mean the longest night. So think of it almost in terms of a feel of, you know how like you have that point in the winter where it just feels like night goes on forever? And there's like that week or month where it just feels like, oh man, I just got out of work, it's 4 o'clock, it's nighttime. On Tikor, during that same point, it's even longer. So this conflict that happened during the night didn't just feel like it happened a long time, it happened a long time in the night. So, and the books, the first set of books that I'll be coming out with basically start at the beginning of the Day of Reckoning. So you get to see that spark, what causes it. And then you basically go from character point to character point, seeing how it escalates, and then the turning point when the Day of Reckoning becomes the longest night. Not that that's necessarily like the day switched to night and then something crazy happened, but it was kind of during that that twilight, that dawn light, that shit really hit the fan. Dusk, I should say. So, the Day of Reckoning. The day the era ended is one that will be etched in the minds of generations to come. It started with the assassination of deity Meme, escalated into the attempted bombing of Ishward, and ended with the destruction of the eastern node. As the sun began to set over the isle, the horizon shimmered as the entire might of the Republic of Vinyata surged forward. An army of 500,000 distraught dragon sped their way up through the neutral country toward their eternal nemesis, Garuda. During the Day of Reckoning, the Council of Sweden had already begun to call in their top officers and units, a preventative measure in case a large-scale attack was needed. After the bombs fell in Vinyata, their forces were already being deployed to launch an offensive on Garuda. So, that's basically your little tidbit into that. So, the Day of Reckoning is basically everything that happened up to that point. So, basically imagine that at the beginning of the day, almost, not quite at dawn, but almost, one of the divinity, which is the name of the pantheon for Garuda, specifically the Karu, was assassinated. And her name was Meme, and she was the deity of wisdom. And the first book actually goes through this. It's actually the first 4 chapters is actually the assassination of Meme. And one of my favorite things is I get to convince people to really like this character, knowing fully well that if you've read a lick of literature, you know she's dead. It's not a secret, it's not even a spoiler. But there's something fun about the reader knowing something's gonna happen, but they're just waiting for when, they're waiting for the how. And so that's a really fun thing to do. You get it makes you, lets you do some things creatively or narratively that only works when the reader themselves kind of knows or has a sense of opinion. Yeah. So that's always fun. But yeah, so as far as the Day of Reckoning, basically, Meme gets whacked. And the entire nation in Garuda is shook. It's just an immediate reaction. To say that rumors spread like wildfire is an understatement. When something that big happens, everybody knows extremely fast. And it's not that, long distance communication doesn't exist in Tikor, it definitely does. But large parts of Garuda are kind of what we think of as rural, but think of more in terms of a landscape, or instead of paving cities through, they just worked with nature, which means that there's this natural land gap between cities sometimes. It's just a thing. So even when information moves, small information or things that happen remotely can take a little bit of time to go. But this was one of the things, everybody was telling everybody, they were whatever form of communication, because there's a sense of calling and whatnot. Though you're more likely to do magic, psychic calls and whatnot, which that's the thing. But everybody knew extremely fast. And if it wasn't for the fact that that's one of those things that you just can't lie about, and it's one of those things where something is so big and it's so real that nobody has a doubt to it, because why would anybody lie about that? They would be the worst lie ever. So there's a sense of panic of oh man, deities can die. And not only can deities die, but they can die because yours was assassinated. And at the time, it seems like Vinyata is the ones responsible for it. So the king of Garuda pretty much reacts in the worst way possible, which is a way that I think we would kind of understand if something was groundbreaking. But he basically is oh, well, we have to retaliate immediately, because the two factions, Garuda and Vinyata, have just had a very bad and long history of basically shitting at each other for not good reasons. And a little bit of it is a sense of the one time I really introduced a concept of racism to my game, because it's not something I particularly enjoy having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So it's definitely something I don't want to indulge with in the game space, but it is something that exists. And I think that if you treat it in the right way, you can use it more to highlight the absurdity of it rather than prevail it, So for Vinyata versus Garuda, and this is the sort of thing that makes this whole conflict even possible. If they didn't have this long long ingrained misunderstanding and hatred, neither side would have jumped to what they did, you know? So it pretty much all goes back to the fact that from the time of the creation, there was a conflict between basically the creator god Ishvana, who created Tikor, and then not so much a rival god, but I like to think that like if you have a god that creates and you have a god that destroys. I think I've talked about this before in a previous one, but I feel like that since the dichotomy is really important to have because it just makes sense. Well, the negative god, the corrupting god, Xavian, he stole the elementals of Tikor and corrupted them, turning them into dragons. So the dragons, and all the dragons basically in Tikor, were once elementals. So a dragon in a sense is a corrupted elemental. But one of the corrupted elementals, the former earth elemental, Ryujin, when he touched down on Tikor, when Xavian sent them out to basically crush the world, he was reconnected with the planet. Being like an earth elemental was more than just about the dirt. He really had a bond with the planet. And so it was almost like going back home, and it broke the deep level of brainwashing and corrupting that Xavian had done on him. Not on any of the other wretched ones, just him. So he was one of the reasons why Xavian didn't win. Him switching over to the other side and basically resisting is what helped Xavian be sealed in the first place. Unfortunately, not everybody was as forgiving of him. And that's kind of where this started. The gods at the time couldn't really get over the fact that at the end of the day, it didn't matter if Ryujin was on the side of the right. He was still a dragon. He was still a wretched one. He was still a corrupted elemental. And his kinfolk had slaughtered a lot of people, a lot of gods. Even after being sealed, like they couldn't help but look at the loss, the fact that the landscape had changed over the course of this war. And Ryujin kind of became the unwanted poster boy for that. And he thought at first that he would be able to make peace with gods that he had once coexisted with in a different way, but they weren't interested. So he retreated into Vinyata, which was basically nothing but hot, arid desert at this time, from basically the heat of Adume coming on it, which was the womb that these dragons were made in the first place. So to him, it was a sense of almost poetic justice. Like, all right, if I can't be around everybody else, then I'll go down to this wrecked piece of land that is forsaken by the birth of what I am now. And he created his own people, just like everybody else created their own people. And he created Drakon. He made them human, just like everyone else did, which in my world, humans are more of, I think of them as just, they're copying off of the vessel that Ishvana first picked. I'm not a huge fan of the whole like made in our creator's image, but I like to think of it more as like an imitation. Because Ishvana didn't create humans because it was her kids, I like to think of it as in terms of it was more of an homage to their mother. So Ryujin did the same. And like a sort of like a, hey, like I'm one of you guys too, remember, like I'm not evil, see, I made it people that look just like Ishvana too. Except he is a dragon, and he's not a deity born directly from Ishvana. So the Drakon are just a little bit different. Not really like in any way that really matters. It's mainly stuff like they present gifts from their father, which is what pretty much every other human type has. They all have some sort of, like what we would think of normally as like meta races where people have like pointy ears, so they're elf. I'm not a fan of that, so instead I would think of them as gifts from the patron. So if like the god itself had those type of elements, then the ones they created have a possibility of having some of those. So some of the Drakon, since they came from a dragon, have things like scales, and not like full scales, I mean like a small patch of scale. Like you would almost think of it as like psoriasis in modern terms if it didn't clearly look like scale, right? Nothing bad, it's not contagious, it's not negative, but the Karoo especially can't help but see that and think, dragons. Dragons are bad. Dragons try to kill our mom, who is still sleeping in a volcano because she burned all her energy trying to save us all. So the gods themselves can't get over it. And because the gods themselves are immortal, and because they're on Tikor, in a sense, they are the ones who taught humans to be racist toward each other, you know? The divinity who were there when Garuda was fighting for them and was there when she was injured and had to leave. Like, they remember that. So then it's like this constant reminder of, yeah, I mean, their Dracana, I guess, is fine, but like, their dad, they hurt her mom, and it's like, bro, that was like a millennia ago, but like, they're gods, so they don't see it like that. Like, we think about how time heals wounds, but that's really more perception and our ability to forget things that happened. So many things happen that you just no longer have that experience to hold on to that keeps you there. But if you're a god, and like, let's say we think of gods as having this ability above us, then of course they would have long memories, which means you hold a grudge for a long time, maybe forever. And so every time the Dracon came up, the divinity of Garuda just somehow always had a negative way to spin it, you know? And so you do that over millennia, and of course the people who created end up having this strong distrust for the Dracon. And it only takes one incident here or there for people to be like, see, told you, validated, they're dragons, they're beast. And it didn't help that I think in the sense of the story, people thought that when Ranjin went to Vinyata, sure, maybe he was going to create something, but they never thought it was going to go anywhere, you know? How would raising people on a shattered piece of land get you anywhere? And yet, the Dracon did, you know? In fact, it was almost that diversity that made them succeed, you know? Because they had to deal with this insanely hot and arid place and a climate that definitely was not conducive for like perfect life, they came out hardier, stronger. Their connection to Hakan is different. Not stronger, but it's different, you know? Like, I think of it almost in terms of a survivalist or someone who is trained in like those people who like Bear Grylls kind of like, yeah, like the quote unquote drop them in the middle of a forest, in the middle of anywhere, and they're good. They tend to come out with qualities that are just different. Like, they're more minded towards survival. They see things and they can't turn it off, and so that's Dracon. And so, you know, it scares the Karu, you know, like, you weren't supposed to go anywhere, and you were made from what must seem like a triple cross. You're an elemental, cool, you're on our side. Then you got kidnapped, hoodwinked, transformed, corrupted into a dragon, cool, not on our side. But then you flipped back on to our side. Does that make you a traitor? Does it make you a hero? Can you be trusted? You know, I like to think that other gods like couldn't understand that, because elementals aren't the same as a deity. You know, they're almost like a natural force, versus like a deity is more of like an awakening of an intelligence of a force. But elementals, like an earth elemental, is the concept of earth. It is the dirt. It is the thunder. It is the quake. It is so many things, and it's simple, but it's brutal and it's unforgiving. But it's also nice, only because it's not necessarily trying to be anything. And the two differences in like these eternal beings able to understand each other ends up causing like conflict through humans. But because the deities don't see it that way, they never come to this understanding. Oh, hey, maybe we're causing undue influence and corruption on these humans. Maybe we should say nice things. Nope, they never thought about that. Never came to their mind. They're like, yeah, well, I mean, you know, humans do their human things, and well, you know, Dracon are, you know, Dracon, so whatever, we'll do our thing. It's almost like not politician, because I don't necessarily like that either. I just like to think of them not human, but I like to imagine what would it have to be like. What would you have to think to be like that? What would your line of thinking be like if you had that power? You created life. Not just created life, but you created life that created other life and is autonomous. You have to look at everything differently. So I try to portray that in the deities and portray them more as deity-ish and less human for the sake of being personified. Sometimes I do things that don't make sense to humans because I see a picture that's grander, and that doesn't make them right, but also doesn't make them wrong. And I feel like that's where you get conflict. Big picture, small picture, neither one is right, neither one is wrong. Sometimes they're on the same page, and sometimes they're wholly on two opposite sides. And the longest night in that whole conflict really resonates that, because did the gods know they could live forever? Did they ever question it? Or did they know that they could die and they never bothered to tell anybody? So do you blame humans for flipping out? Do you blame the gods for not ever being realistic about the fact that they are not immortal? You know? So it's like, there's things like that that I want to subtly play off of, and watching things escalate as the gods kind of stand by in a sense of, I don't want to say glee, but there's definitely parts in the book where I show you how the rest of the divinity are beyond unhappy that Meme was killed. Like, I don't want to say distraught, because once again, humanization, but there's an eternal bond that they had with her, and she's gone, and they're not okay with that. And instead of necessarily showing them as wrathful for the sake of being wrathful, because once again, I think that's like a human personification, I want to show them as being single-minded in their desire. Their desire is for this to be the last, the only one, and for anybody involved to understand a lesson so grave that no one would ever contemplate harming a god again. Now, one could easily imagine me wrathful and striking down humans, but if humans are part of your creation and your mom's kids, that's not your point either. Your point is to teach them and chide them in a way that they understand. And if they have to take some licks, humans, they'll get it. Maybe not this generation, but the next generation. Like, that's a thing I wanna start bringing up more, like in terms of how gods treat people. Like, they almost have to a god, we have to seem like cats or mice. Like, sure, maybe we think about them as a singular one, but really we think about them as a whole. We only care once we think about them being extinct. If there's a shit ton of rats around, then we start going, oh yeah, we can call them to a bit. And gods have to think the same way. Humans aren't just special because they talk. Like, if you're a divine being, I'm sure you've seen lots of shit that's talking segment. That's not a special thing. So you treat humans a little differently. And that's why the gods also do not really interfere during the longest night or the day of reckoning. Because there's a sense of, I feel like whenever we think about divine intervention is more in terms of like, do I want, like, I expect the gods to be like, no, and babysit me all the time. And it's like, well, man, I want to do something different. I just want the gods to feel like they have their own station, but you don't really know what that is. If another one brought it up, the others would laugh at them. Yeah. Like, they would just... And I love that sort of thing, is imagining, like, what that's to be like, and just being like, these ones... But the longest night's a pretty cool story. I really enjoy the fact that it has like a bit of back and forth. Like, it starts off with basically Vinyata. Well, I guess we'll do like a quick summary. So Meme gets murdered. Everybody hears about it. The king of Garuda hears about it, and he kind of flips his shit, as one would expect. Because for the kings of Garuda, they're not just kings. They are people who deal with the divinity often. So it's not just a god that dies. He knows the god. He knows the repercussions, and he knows that things are going to happen. And so his reaction is in a way overblown, but for what he knows, what he's seen, to him it's like he has to set things on track, even if it means killing millions of people, you know? And that's just one of those things that I feel like is in a weird way human, that we don't necessarily like. We think we have a plan, and like, what's the famous Mike Tyson line? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Yeah, it's the same thing, man. Like, you think you know how you want to handle a situation until it goes down, and then you're just lost in your thoughts and your emotions. And so I want to show like the gods to have emotions, but I also want to show them processing their emotions differently from humans. Like, humans, we have a tendency to immediately break down, and we're sad, and we're crying, we can't function, and gods are stronger than that. Or maybe they're weaker than that, but in different ways, you know? Like, they're not necessarily gonna break down or whatnot, but maybe they just close themselves off. Like, imagine what it has to be like for a god that needs time. You know, because a person can go into a funk for days, weeks, months, years. And if you're a god and your lifespan is infinitely longer than that, man, you might be like, maybe your shortest level of funk, maybe the equivalent of I'm going to my room for the day is like a year, 2 years, 10 years, 100 years. Which maybe that's interesting to write into. Have it to where it's not that the god necessarily go to sleep, but like something bad happens or tragic in their life, and then just like, I'm done with everybody for a while. I'll be back later. But later for them is like 100 years. They're like, alright, I'm done with it. Alright guys, I'm over being salty, and they come back and it's like a whole different range of humans, and they're like, what happened to the other human I was talking to? And they're like, oh, that was like 100 odd years ago. And like, oh yeah, like that's right. There, I like that. So that kind of stuff. I get the weirdest spam now. I wonder how people feel about having like their school emails hijacked. Because I get spam from like literally collegiate places. It's the weirdest thing. Oh. Alright. Before I continue on, anybody have any questions? I know it's kind of random kind of a thing. I feel like it's a sleepy Tuesday. Where's my usual peeps? Unicorns are just spellcaster rhinos. That's a winning comment. Feels bad, man. Which one, Fergie, like one of the regulars? Yeah, my one of my big themes of it is balance, for sure. Because to me, that's what really makes a world continuously compelling, you know, is having a balance. Because if everything is just all or nothing, then it's just a pendulum that switches back and forth, you know? And I feel like that's how you just go from one big bad to the other. And it's like everything is either an apocalypse or it's a utopia, but it's only utopia until it's an apocalypse. So I want to feel like Tikor is a world that never stops. So even if you're having a big epic campaign or it's a big epic book, it's never a question of will Tikor disappear or will it be destroyed. It's more like, what will happen to these people? Like, I want people to care about those characters. You know, like Game of Thrones. Like, nobody really thought that like Westeros was gonna explode. Like, they were just worried that like all humans would become zombies. You know? I like those kind of things. I'm still cracking up with this unicorns are just spellcaster rhinos. I like how this morning I ignited this whole, well, not ignited, but I was just feeling pithy. I was basically saying that rhinos are just armored unicorns. And so now we've gone into different realms. And so now it's unicorns are just spellcasting rhinos. And I kind of like that. Like a unicorn in his little mage outfit, which would just be hilarious. And yep, can't enjoy the warmth if you never know the cold. I always mean the deity coming back to talk to a mortal and find out that particular mortal died. Oh yeah. Feels bad, man. Yeah, like that would be like the mortals would be like, oh, that sucks. I like that human that is just like that caring but still cold, like detached. You know, like someone's like goldfish. miss that fish? I go, I'm sure you will, buddy. Unicorns are just zebras. Zebras are zebras. Let them be their own people. And let them go. They're just trying to shine and look sexy. Man. Where is everybody today? This is why I'm just gonna stream every week, and then people just forget about you. I'm sad. More assume they walk around together in the heights, but yeah. I mean, that just means the unicorns are the ones hiding. Do you have any questions, Ash? As someone who shows up fairly often and knows a pretty decent amount about Swordsfall at this point, I feel like, given you've been around for a while. Maybe I should start putting up this I'll start working on like my Twitch layout to make it a little bit more like fun looking and interactive. I don't know. There's like there was the did I turn it on? There's like a quest thingy that I have, but I don't remember what it was now. I think it was like quest mode. Only one that comes to mind is how do you do the hemispheres in terms of like how I made it, like how I like laid out like the biodomes, that sort of thing. Ah, there we go. So I kind of started with like the normal theory for building worlds. Like in my mind, I already had an idea for how I wanted the world to be. I knew that I wanted a world where they were just almost split in two. Not like all the way, but almost. And then basically, once I had that idea, I kind of I won't say like naturally thought about it, but it's one of those things where we're kind of used to the way biomes are laid out. Like we kind of understand that logic to it. We understand that the further away you are from the source of heat, the colder it gets. So the poles end up being hotter. The closer you are to the sun, the equator ends up being hotter. And then after that, I kind of just took like what like Artixafan on YouTube and some other people talked about, and I made so if you look at the map in the background, I started it off obviously without any of the terrain on it. It was just a landmass. And I worked on the landmass until I just kind of liked the way it looked. And then I actually got a 3D world mapping software, like totally free. And it's like what they use at colleges and stuff. I want to say I don't want to say NASA, but something else constellation related. But anyway, so I put that through the 3D world map, and that gave me a nice little 3D look at where the world is, which is really helpful because when you look at it in a 2D space, it doesn't always make sense. Like, it's real easy to make your world flat instead of curved, which really changes how you look at it. So once I kind of looked at that, then I was like, all right. And then you have to figure out, like, how much of an axis do you want to put on your planet? And I try not to make that super complicated, but you look it up, and there's like 2 or 3 different ones. So I was like, all right, well, we'll keep it close-ish to Earth, so I don't have to rebuild the wheel every time I want to do something. You know? So you tilt the axis, and the program actually does all this for you, so it's not like I did some special little part of it. But it tilts it. And then I basically got to look at the whole world, and I was like, all right. And then I didn't draw it on like the program itself, but in my mind and like on my little Photoshop version, I kind of noted, all right. I was like, well, this top part, and I started like this top part's gonna be like your pole cap, and that way when it unfolds, you can look at it and be like, okay, so it's gonna be that top half. You can also mark it on the map. I just didn't really need to for me personally, but like, don't feel bad doing that. So did that, and then I did the same thing with the bottom, and then the rest of it was not rest of it, so go step by step. So then the next thing was to figure out tectonic plates, and there's like a whole long explanation on all that I wasn't necessarily interested in because I didn't want to do super perfect one-to-one tectonic plates. Like, I'm not that messed with that. But I wanted to get it close enough to where it made sense what mountains were. So I started off with doing tectonic plates, and then once again, on that one, actually I had the little Photoshop up, so as I was looking at where the tectonic plates were on this little 3D map program, I kind of looked at my map and was like, alright, well, then that means there would be mountains here, and then mountains there. God, it sounds more complicated than it is. It really wasn't as complicated as it sounds. It's just sort of remembering that the world forms for a reason. And just like with my world building, when you tackle the reason and you look at the reason, then everything else makes sense. So once you realize that mountains are just parts where tectonic plates smash against each other because they're rude and don't know how to give each other space, then it makes sense when mountains come up. And then you're like, oh, well, of course there's a mountain there. And that's why an island is there, because the island is the tip of the mountain. And then all of a sudden, like, I feel like the world clicks, and you're like, oh, well, shoot, yeah, that river wouldn't go there because that mountain has to go there. And once you see it in your mind like that, you realize why the world we had is the way it is. And it's just like a big click factor. You know, it's like cookie. Cookie doesn't make sense until the day where you're like, oh, and then it clicks. What up, Zareth? What's the name of the program? I'll have to look through my list. I think I still have. So I haven't installed it. I've used it in a year. But let me see if I still have a link to it in here somewhere. I think it was. Did I open right to it? Are we in luck? Well, this isn't the one, but that one's pretty good. My bookmarks open straight to that one, so we're gonna throw that one as a little kiss man right there. God, my links are getting out of control. I'll have to look it up again. It was a super simple program. Not the easiest to use, because like all simple programs, it just means that all your configurations are just thrown out there, you know? So you just have to learn all of them. Yeah. But toy around with that one, because that one's pretty fun too. But I'll look it up and I'll throw it out somewhere. But yeah, so doing that really helps. I mean, and yeah, and like building your planet in a weird way is building a character. Like your planet should have, like in a way, its own character and character feel to it, you know. So building your world in a structured way instead of you know, what would be cool here? A river and a mountain, which like not to hit on anybody, because I'm like that's like a bad way to draw a fantasy man, but you can tell it's a fantasy man. Right? We've seen enough real maps in our world that's what makes making maps hard. Is that it's weird to think of how a land mass is made in the first place. You know, trying to take what I'm told and figure out what the heck they're even dealing with. Yeah, well, like I always jump into the mind of my characters. I'm always driving through the seat of literally their car. I try not to go into God mode except when I'm doing like a general plot outline. You know, I'll do like a general plot outline in terms of usually like conflict. Like I'll know who someone wants to mess with this person because this thing happens, and then I start from the beginning and think, okay, like how will we get there? And then have that character actions go through that. And for me, that's just how I like to write. That's why I ended up really liking Game of Thrones, and I think that's why I'm one of the few people that was totally happy, is because I always saw it as the result of this character's actions, this character action, and never the in-game or end result or what they should or should not do. It was always like, oh, he's going down that path? Well, that means X, Y, Z. And then seeing how X, Y, Z folds out was like the pleasure to me. So that's how I like to write in the first place. So I really enjoyed it that way. But I super recommend checking out like just like a couple brief videos on Taconic play theory did wonders. You don't even have to understand like the science behind it, but understanding that some plates, you know, smash and then like they grind laterally, and some hump over each other, and like the different ways that those make different mountains, and it just clicks. You're like, oh, that makes sense. So this type would make this type of mountain, and then when you make the map, which I use Wonder Draft, then it just made sense to use just size wise, you know, and yeah, and I draw like lines and stuff like that. So I would draw like lines where I would want like a mountain range before I actually put mountains. That way I can kind of get like a flow sense. Welcome back. It's because I'm in your head. For me, like, I feel like being a writer didn't ruin shows for me. If anything, it made me enjoy shows. What ruined shows for me was being a techie. Because, good lord, everything tech, I swear they try their hardest to make up shit and pass it. And it always surprises me how little people understand about tech. But being a writer, if anything, has made me enjoy more shows. I feel like if I wasn't a writer, I would be less happy with Game of Thrones. And that's not a dig, but, you know. There's just weird things about character confluence that I think you only really think about when you are the kind of person with a writing-oriented mind. You know? Good or bad. But generally that's how it feels like, you know? I am not fucking with you. Coffee's for closers only. Ash, me, okay, so this is likely going this way, and it did. Crap. Yeah, definitely. That's usually how I feel about it. Zerf says, what would you say helps you most when you can't seem to put an idea to paper? I'm almost a bad person to ask this question because, this is not egotistical, I never really have a hard time putting an idea to paper. And what I mean by that is I never get to a point where I'm like, I don't know how to put this idea to paper. I always start with a kernel of an idea, and because for me, I'm really focused on Swordsfall, my line of thinking is always, okay, how does this fit into the world? Does it fit into the world? If it does fit into the world, what does it look like? Like, for instance, this morning, after the Armored Rhino comment, I've been mulling over the concept of A, rideable like rhinos, and B, mechanical rhinos. And I both have been thinking about, okay, how would I put that in my world? So the first thing I do pretty much anytime I do anything is research. And if there's one reason I think that it's really easy for me to form ideas is because I'm just an omni nerd. I'm the dude that if you walk into like my house at any given time and look at my browser, there's like no less than like 12 windows open. And that's just on one browser. If you were to open up Firefox, it would like have another 15 completely different browsers, because sometimes I'm doing info and I don't want to mix up the auto population from Chrome, so I open up a Firefox. It's just like like knowledge really helps. And what I mean is like not necessarily pointed information. Like it would be easy to be like, okay, I want to put rhinos as mounts, so I'll look up to see like, do people ride rhinos? The answer is usually maybe, but not in a way that we like. And that's usually how most ideas, where if you think of how cool would this be, you're probably not the first one to think it, because humans just, that's how we come up with stuff. But the fact we don't have it means it's not practical for some reason. So really, the crux of your idea isn't, is it a thing? It's how do I make it seem practical? Because that's the part that we get stuck on. It's not that it's weird that someone would ride a rhino, but when you think about it, your brain goes, that doesn't make sense because of what you know about a rhino and what you know about a person. So your idea has to meld that. So what I do, and what I was doing earlier, is I'm like, okay, what makes something rideable? That's how I solve that equation. What makes something mountable? Because we could really just hop on fucking anything and be like, take me there. But there's a reason why a horse works so fucking well. So sometimes you think, okay, why does a horse work so well as a mount? That doesn't always mean that the 2019 answer is your answer. Usually it's your BC answer, your people who had no technology, who had no normal means of doing it, who for whatever reason had a solution that had to be solved, and horses was it. And it worked so fucking well that everyone else was like, oh shit, horses, bro? Let me copy that, because that's what happens. And so honestly, when you look at it, for horses, it really comes down to the fact that horses are very, very breakable because they're not a predatory animal. And this is like that interesting thing where you get into, this is a side topic, but I love this kind of shit. This interesting thing you get to when it comes to creatures. There's a vast difference between what you can do with a prey creature and a predator creature. Two totally different things. There are parts that you can never replicate on one on the other because it's literally about how they live through life. Their bodies are designed for one or the other, and therefore there's certain machinations that come with that. So horses make good mounts because they are prey animals, and that means they're not predatory. They don't spend their whole time attacking other things. Sometimes people think of like prey as like vegetarian and predator as like meat eating. It's just that predators typically are predators because it requires them to stock a food, which is usually something living, but plenty of prey eat meat. I just want to put that out there because that's super annoying to see all the time. They just don't spend all their time learning really well on how to murder other things. So like our ability to break them, it's why we have so many terms about breaking that go along with a horse, is because that's really the animal that let us understand a sense of breaking. Not a herd animal like a cow, where as a whole its individual intelligence is low. A horse by itself is quite intelligent. However, you can make them only take that direction from you, regardless of the fact that you are not more powerful than the horse, right? And like you get, like I found there's all these like different, like there's a whole I don't want to say subculture in like an unhealthy way, but it's like a whole subculture of horse breaking. Like it is a science. Like there's ways to do it. You're like tricking this horse into realizing you're like its friend, but also a predator, but a nice predator. It's fucking weird, right? So when you get to something big like a rhino, you can't really break a rhino. Why? Because a rhino isn't a prey creature. It's in that weird middle spot of it does what it has to do to survive. We think of them as like herd or prey because they eat a lot of vegetation and whatnot, but rhinos are super fucking aggressive. They don't like to be fucked with by anybody, not even other rhino. So they're just naturally almost independent to a fault and stubborn. and they just don't have the need for shelter and protection that we need to make them a mountable animal. So for rhinos to be mountable in my game, I have to figure out how would you introduce an element to make rhinos be broken in a way that doesn't feel like whatever. And that's always where you get into animal husbandry, and that's ultimately how I'm going to do my idea. I say this because this is something I've already solved long ago, but it's as simple as like we really came to be animal husbandry came because we realized that dealing with animals isn't as simple as like kill, eat, ride. You know, there's like a weird relationship, and if you take certain animals and if you show the animals as a whole that you can cohabitate, you get access to things that you wouldn't by just capture or kill. You know, same thing with rhinos. Now my game has magic, so I get to like kind of cheat a little bit and be magic, but I'm not just saying that you just go magic, you take the mind over the rhino. Instead, I have people who animal husbandry with a little bit of psychic connection. Almost think of it as a Dr. Dolittle, but instead of speaking to animals in their language, just in terms of the same way that we see human body language in this really complex way, they can see animals in that truly complex way, not in a human way. They see like the animal way. They can speak to them. And then so really you make contracts with rhinos. Because I like to imagine that because the animals in Swordsfall are more free will than we like to think of them as. Because they don't necessarily, you don't have to be intelligent to have sentience. You just kind of have to have like your own free will, your will to do something. So rhinos have their own will, and so basically these animal husbandries make deals, these contracts with rhinos. And as long as you treat the rhino right, and like the rhino has its own given name, you have to be able to say it correctly. And as long as you do those things, the rhino's like, man, I guess I'll like let you carry me, human. But if there's snacks nearby, you know what I want. So, and that's how I deal with it in my world, and like for me, and the way that it's built in Africa, it makes sense. But you know what I mean? If you just think about it in terms of more of why doesn't it work, and less of what would be a cool way, because I feel like that's the trap. The cool way doesn't always make sense. Usually it's cool because it works. You know? Like juggling isn't really cool by mechanism. It's cool because you can't do it without figuring out the mechanism. So it's not the mechanism that's cool, it's the fact that you figured it out by yourself. And you can do this cool thing, you know? Like I need a mechanical rhino in a shirt, hell yeah. I'm interested to think what would a rhino look like if humans domesticated and bred it for riding. Yeah, in a current world sense, but I have some issues with because in a sense domesticating is an issue because domesticating is really just a fancy word for we corrupted their DNA through inbred. Some deities could ride a rhino that has wings. As far as that, I try not to because I hate how like that's kind of what I say about the fantasy solution. Wings aren't always the solution, and not everything has to fly. Like I like the fact that flying is a compromise because that's what makes flight awesome. You can only fly because you're giving up something. Instead, I want to kind of make it seem like the birds should be envious of the ones who know how to master the land. Like sure, a bird can fly, but a bird on land looks dumb. But a rhino? Shit. A rhino never saw a terrain it couldn't bear through. A forest? Whatever. Speed bump. You know, like I wanted to make it seem like, who cares if a rhino doesn't have wings? A rhino can do this badass shit, and that's why you ride a rhino. You know? They're built for endurance because they need to run away from predators, right? Yep. And that's a common thing you see with prey animals. They almost always have good endurance because you got to get away. You know? So, kind of like that with the rhino. Rhino, protect me, feed me, don't mistreat me, then I'll let you ride me. Mess it up, then you get the horn. And that's how I want it to feel like. And and it's kind of like how Ash said earlier about balance. That is a thing in Swordsfall. And I want it to feel, it's a world where humans play a role, but humans have not, by default, just conquered everything. Like, you have to learn to compromise, because humans are not the alpha. Like, sure, you want to ride a rhino? You gotta respect the rhino, because the rhino's not your bitch. You didn't buy the rhino. The rhino's doing you a service. And in return, you were doing the rhino a service. And if you fuck with the rhino, that's cool. Maybe that rhino, whatever. But rhino has friends. The rhino has a god. So I want that to feel like those repercussions. Like, humans are always like, don't mess with me or you'll feel the weight of our god. And then we never feel like animals or anything like that have gods. And if they do, they're automatically less cool than our gods. Not a fan of that either. I really want the sense of like, even the most lowly like animal like in forest has gods that like can fuck you up if you really go out of your way to fuck up shit, So sure, go ahead. Try to poach some rhinos because you heard that the horn of the rhino had sacred elements. That's cool. Ever thought about what a rhino god would be like? Because that would be awful. It would just sound like a train just and you're like, what is that? And then here comes this rhino god coming in like the Kool-Aid man, just through your house, murders everybody. And people are like, did you hear what happened down the road? What? Yeah, the rhino god, Dundarius. Man, I heard he was poaching. Oh yeah, is that what? Mm-hmm. That's why I don't fuck with rhinos. Had it coming. So, that kind of shit cracks me up. The joke in my world is that a lot of non-humans think humans are the creator's favorites because how are these things still alive? How are they still alive? Yeah, I guess that's a way. I like to think that humans think, like animals think of humans in the same way we think of dolphins and foxes. Like we recognize their craftiness as far as an animal goes. They're like, well, the dolphin's really smart for an animal. And like the animals are that way. They're like, like they're really crafty for humans. Like they both just think that there's these natural things that they can't do, so therefore they suck. Like, yeah, humans, we think we're badass with the technology, but you drop us off butt naked in a forest and we're like, help us, woodland creatures. Help us. Plus, I want to just have like fun things, but in like not like in a human anthropological way. Like I wanna imagine like a human's out camping and he gets lost, right? And you have like that stereotypical forest scene where it's like, help me. And like in a fantasy world, you'd have like the deer shows up and it's like, oh, human, you're lost. I can help you. And the human's like, oh, thank you. And like leads them out the forest and they're like, oh, this forest was so great. Oh, thank you, dear. And we're like, yay, nature. I want it to be like that way in my story too, except the guy gets down the road and he's like, where's my wallet? I felt like I had snacks in my pack. What? Did that? And the deer shut him down. Like I want the animals to feel like they have their own like a sense of authority and they're not just by default like slaves and bitches to humans. Like sure, maybe the forest, deer are nice, but deer also, they got shit they have to do. They have things they have to protect, and human tools can go along with the animal world too. I think that sometimes like animals have their own secret like underground market. Like imagine all the shit that people leave laying around that we don't think about, and then animals pick it up, and then they're like, oh yeah, some human left his watch. I heard these things are worth stuff, and then like they have an animal who can shift into a human, goes sells the watch, pawns it downtown for money, buys food, goes to the forest, and is like, stupid humans leaving stuff around. I don't know. I just want to have fun stuff like that. So like I like to make humans feel human and animals feel animal, and I'm not always a fan when we like cross the line, Like not to say that humans can't have animal cage races and vice versa, but there's so much cool shit you can do with animals. Animals don't give a fuck. Like, what I mean? We've seen in the videos or in the shit, like animals do not give a fuck. Like we think of ducks as cute until you come into that duck that does not give a fuck, and the duck is like, I'm walking across the street, bitch, waddle, 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 like. And we like to think of them as all cute ducks, and I like to think of the duck as like, nah, bitch, you stop. I was here first. I don't care. And instead of like raccoons feeling like they're dumb, raccoons just the dudes who are like at the animal meeting, they're like, but guys, I'm just saying, they leave all this food outside in these big old containers. Why don't we just go in there and taking the shit? I'm just saying, it's there. And they're asleep. What's the problem? And everybody else is like, that's kind of low, don't you think? Like, don't you want to get it fresh? And raccoons are like, but it's still tasty. And so that's why raccoons are in your trash, because they think it's free food and they don't see what the point of it is. Like, why to let it go? Right? Raccoons think the animals evolved. They're like, but why else would you put it there? Like, they just can't get how humans would throw out like food that they think is old. They're like, I mean, why else would they put it there? So, you know, and like that kind of stuff is fun. So I want to do more of that kind of stuff. And like same thing with not that I have a problem with domestication. I just have a problem with how we automatically think of everything as domesticatable instead of friendship. You know, same thing with pets. Like I want to have more exotic pets, but not have it be so like, oh yeah, I own you. Like I want to have cool pets, but it's like a roommate situation. You know, like a cat. Like a cat really isn't your pet. A cat's that roommate that you let come in and just you don't realize they've decided to never pay rent. You know? Oh yeah, in some cases, humans who are domesticated by animals, 100%. 100%. And I really want to like drive that home, and not like a necessarily a funny way, but like in a sort of there's a balance to the world, you know. So that kind of stuff. What a side tangent. I don't even know what the whole point of that was. What the fuck was I even talking about? I don't know. I love this shit though. This is the kind of stuff that I do in my infinite spare time, writing and just thinking about random weird shit. My biggest thing I always recommend people is just to read random stuff, watch random stuff. Like, it doesn't even have to be related directly to what you're doing. Like, let's say you write sci-fi, and someone would say, you know, we'll watch sci-fi movies and read sci-fi books. And that's not wrong. But also, you don't necessarily know more by reading more about what you know. You know? You gotta explore, branch out. Sometimes you'll find a cool idea in something totally fucking unrelated. I get so many cool ideas from random weird documentaries about shit that I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. And then you 7 degrees of bacon, Kevin Bacon yourself back to it, and you're like, oh shit, I could write this. You know. Humans make sure to leave a percentage of all their food out for the raccoons. Protection fees to keep the badgers out. I like that. Like, they had, like, animal shakedowns. Because I could totally see that, dude. Like, and you know, there's like a weird relationship, like, when you think about some of the practices that indigenous cultures would have had. I could see how a lot of ways that was that. Like, you don't want to go around killing badgers because they're stealing stuff. You know what I mean? Like, once again, there's a balance. Even if you don't think of animals as anything more than animals, you just can't kill all the badgers, right? You got to figure out eventually, how can I keep these badgers out of my shit? And so one day, here comes a raccoon, and the raccoon comes up and it's like, hey, I want to make you an offer. I'm just saying, if you want to keep these badgers out of your yard, and you leave a little extra piece of steak on the side, and we'll take care of things. And you're like, well, you know, that's a fair deal, Mr. Raccoon. We'll take you up on that offer. And then it works. So tell your neighbors, they're like, how do you keep those damn badgers out of your yard? Oh, this raccoon, I just pay out the raccoon, I give them old steak. They're like, oh shit, really? That works? Like, oh yeah. You know? And humans are the ones that think we're getting on it, because they're like, all I do is give this silly raccoon a steak, and he keeps the badgers out. But really, the raccoon walked to the badger and was like, hey bro, I just worked out a deal. How about I give you half of this steak, and don't just give it to us for free as long as you stay away. And the badger's like, oh shit, really? I don't have to go out of my way to go dive through the trash and just bring it to us? Like, oh yeah. Hell yeah, you wanna go like fuck with the squirrels? Yeah, let's go. You know? So, like, I like to think that sometimes humans are the ones that are getting like the short end of the stick. Like, we think we got over the one, but the animals are like, these dumbasses, they don't even know. Honey badgers in the protection racket. Do you want to mess with honey badger? Do you? You want to mess with honey badger? Like, the honey badger's like the enforcer of the marsupials. No, is it no, not marsupial. I totally fucked that up. What's the class of creatures that raccoon? What's the raccoon badgers? Possums? What is that? I'm trying to think of it without having to look it up. wanted to say marsupial, but it's not marsupial. Anyway. I swear my favorite thing is when I know I read/watch something and I'm reading my stuff and go, oh, wait, I love that. You're like, oh, I did pretty good. Imagine the cat gangs that make sure to keep the rat underground from underrising, right? That shit cracks me up. But I want to make animals more of a presence in our world too. I feel like that's one way to make your world not feel as empty, is to really make your life in your world count. Like, not just have everything be like some random thing. Like, oh yeah, it's got these random animals and that doesn't matter. Not to say you have to write out each animal, but you know, giving like a sense of free will to things we already see in animals. A little part of me thinks like utopia right now. Like, this is kind of messed up, but I just imagine it's like, what would a hummingbird be? Method. Like, secretly, like, humans think hummingbirds are amazing, but in Animal Kingdom, nobody has respect for hummingbirds. They have such a short life because they're basically meth heads, and people are like trying to get them off the nectar, but the hummingbird's like, no, I need it. I cracked myself up. Best rackets are when those that donate think they're getting the good end of the deal, while the receiver just sits at home. That is the truth. I would leave it up to nobody better than like a raccoon and badger to come up with like a good racket. Like, mad shady. They're like, oh yeah, and like, and that's why they can't sit still. They're just permanently on the. And like all the other like birds, like sparrows, or that's how they raise their kids. Like, do you want to grow up and be a hummingbird? Do you? No, you don't. Cause look at him. He's gonna be dead tomorrow. Off that nectar.
Want a few drinks and smoke a joint, Bubbles?
This is cracking me up. I'm really gonna have to add some of this stuff in now. This is gonna make for fun stuff in the animals book, because the animals book is in a faux first person sort of film. Like, what I mean faux first, I guess it would be second person, but you know, where there's a sense of you're reading a book but it was written by someone in the perspective for you to read, you know. So I wanted to read like this grizzled old animalist is writing this survival book for new people, and so he talks about stuff like this, like he like that. It's like, you gotta watch out for those brackets. And just reading it, it's like, yeah, you think that raccoons and badgers don't like each other, but little do most people realize they run one of the most extensive food rackets in Garuda. And you're like, oh shit. Yes, yeah, Ash, where the author is talking to you. Is that second? God, I forget all my different, because it wouldn't be unlimited. Omniscient? Yeah, I don't remember. I'm sure you're about to tell me. You remember this stuff very, very well. Hey man, you got that sugar water? I just need a little bit, man. I just need a little bit. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. You got some? Over here? Huh? Just a little bit? Just a little bit? No, what? Nectar? Over there? Cracks me up. Now I have a Swordsfall expansion. Play as the raccoon or the honey badger. Don't fuck with me. I'll have like Tumo or Jono draw a fucking badass honey badger right now, because that shit would crack me up. Second is, you reach for the door, you go through the room. First is, I went through the room. That's fair. God, I hate second person. I've never liked that style. Ugh. So I guess it's what? First person omniscient? No, limited, because I don't know. I'm done with that. Sugar equals crystal would be kind of like, yeah, kind of like a tourist guide. It's like a weird like tourist guide part like training manual. So I do that kind of stuff. Honey badger. Yeah, no, I guess that's true. And a choya, that makes sense. The module I'm writing for Beneath the Canals, it's choya, basically choose your own adventure, more or less. It's kind of cool. Which people have brought up some pretty cool creatures from the creature creator actually tier from Kickstarter. Hey, let's look over some of those actually. That'll be fun. Because I think we started this war, but we ended up talking about animals, and I'm okay with that. Gotta think about the animals. Let's see. Creature creator. One person hasn't responded yet. Ugh. Honey badgers don't give no shits. Let's see, what do we have here? So this first one, it's a dark mode. It's called a Kamolusk. Yeah, Kamolusk. It's a cephaloid-like creature. It can survive anywhere so long as it isn't in direct sunlight. Uses adaptive camouflage to survive. While it can survive in most terrains, it prefers forest where there is a compromise of food and can be protected from direct sunlight. It can blend in with tree trunks and uses tendrils to catch smaller creatures or scurry past. They get the tendrils or roots. Well, that's just mean. That's kind of creepy sounding. Like cephalopods kind of creep me out. Like, cuttlefish are weird looking. So it's like a... Is it water and land? I guess it must be land because it says tree trunks, tendrils. That's creepy looking. That's creepy thinking. I'm just thinking about what it would look like. This weird tendril, and then like it crawls across like the forest, and like it finds like a tree with like an opening, and it kind of like crawls into it and leaves out its little things, and the rabbit's like, hey, look, blah, blah. Creepy. Creepy. Kamolusk. Second person is very unusual, usually used in avant-garde. Yeah, was never a fan of that style. Man, just picture the human adventurer having to make a deal with Honey Badger that is running the underground racket. Right? Plus that would put a whole trip on like being safe in the wilderness. Like instead of it just being all about death, like someone's like, alright, like bear's in this area, and like you ignore it and you run into a bear, and instead of being slaughtered by the bear, like there's a bear like slaps you, and then the bear's like, give me food. But like, because animals don't use vocal cords because they don't have them, there's like a I don't want to say psychic connection because it's not like they can read your mind, but I think of it more as a connecting to the ether. So it's like you hear them in your head in the same way that you might hear your own thoughts, but you can tell it's the animal, if that makes sense. So instead of it feeling like the animal psychically shout into your head, it's like you hear the animal's voice in your head, but you very much know what it's saying. That's kind of what happens with, and that's not necessarily what happens with all animals in Swordsfall on Tikor. It's one of those things that depends on the type of the creature and the social ability of it. Some creatures have no interest in beast speak and just literally won't. Some will. Some will if like they want to. So like there's no general guideline for who can and who can't. They can put thoughts out, but not take the thoughts out of your head. Yeah. Yep. And they're not inserted in your head, you know? So that sort of thing too. So you run into the bear, and the bear just like, poof, and the bear's like, give me all your fucking food. And you're like, what? And the bear's like, I smell what's in your pack. Give it to me. And then, so you're out in the woods and you get shook down by a bear. And that's what they tell you. Watch out for bears. You know. What up, Mob J? I just love the thought of animal shakedowns. That shit cracks me up now. That's like my new favorite trope I want to start. Animals are just like, I've had enough of this shit. What up, Bookster? Welcome. Sounds weird. Snakes. I only think of snakes as almost in their own class by themselves. Because like when I think of snakes, they have their own weird sense of independence, and yet like you don't domesticate a snake, but at the same time you can train a snake to do certain stuff, but you always know the snake is not on your side. But not all snakes are the same. So I think of snakes as being greedy in a sense, but not in the way we think of greed in terms of collection. Like a snake is greedy in terms of a snake will do or say what it wants to get what it wants. And I feel like that's why we always have that personification as like a snake in the grass. Like a snake just wants to fucking live, bro. And a snake will warn you, like the classic rattlesnake. Like the rattlesnake shakes its tail because it's like, leave me alone, you bitch. This is my spot. Don't tread on me. And if you do, then he very much wants to just kill you straight off. And that's that. You know? So, I feel like that's how snakes would be. Like, you'd always have to be very careful dealing with a snake because not every snake is the same. So it's like dealing with every snake is just starting over again. And you have to be really careful about which one you're dealing with and who. Because some snakes, once again, will just be a sneak and just have no interest in you. In good or bad way. Check it. When I come into place, excitement, like a plane watch took the Jacob. Always bring spare food in the wilderness just in case you run into a bear. Exactly. I love that. You know, it was like that classic, like, take all the things they tell you about the city. Yeah, take extra money with you in case you get mugged. Yeah, take extra food with you in the forest in case you run across a bear. Hungry grizzly bear shakedowns. And then, like, you'd have, like, the smaller ones, like the brown bears, since they don't really, like, fight. They, like, show up in, like, groups, like bros. And, oh, what do we have here? Look, we got a human. Look at me, I'm a human. I got my backpack. Oh, give me some food. Cracks me up. I like that. I like that personification. Yeah. I don't know how many animals I'm gonna have in the animals book, but I think definitely not I mean, I was always gonna have some bears. That's already a thing. That section's already in that. But I'm gonna have to do some cool things with raccoons and badgers for sure. I think. So, Jane, do you know the song 1 Pound Fish? Nope. What's that again? Booster. I am into music, indeed. For some reason, I can't see these criminal bears without hats, right? I just saw like the snapback, like, oh, look at over here. It'll be fun to have on, like, I'm sure you could do like maybe a lick of hair in a way that looks like the brim of a hat in a little bit of a way, just kind of like just little tidbits of that feel to it would be fun. Yeah, I'll write that down and said that Joan is about to work on some dragons, so that'll be super cool here soon. So I'm looking forward to that. So I'll add that to it to do some of that cool stuff too. So that'd be legit. That cracks me up though. I love this shit. Man, what else would be cool? Lately I've just been going through like one of the big things I'm trying to do with Swordsfall is bringing like a lot of more like lesser known animals to the forefront, like real life ones, you know? Because there's some really crazy animals that if you just heard about in a bubble, you would think didn't exist, you know? But it's only like when you read it in the book and you're like, oh shit, that's a real thing on Earth. Like, yeah. So some of the cool stuff. And there's also some creatures that are extinct now that I want to kind of have in there, sort of bring back. So that's why like one of the first like creatures I did was the 90 bear, you know, because that's a mythological one that's really popular. And then the Atlas bear. It was a bear type that should have been in Africa. Like, it was actually supposed to be pretty large, like just short of. I think it was actually a little bit bigger than polar bear, but they died long ago. So stuff like that. Deep Ferg, a dodo. Yeah, you know, maybe make the dodo cooler. Poor dodo. It got deaded just because it was dumb. It didn't deserve it. That's why I think it's cool to have like a sense of animal gods, you know? Because it's like, going extinct is no joke. I want to feel like they get it back. So, yeah, I saw you, but like, you know, I mean, this is my stream, bro. So, you know, we can talk about me and then hit me up afterwards. I can check it out afterwards, but my stream is my stream. Appreciate it. But yeah, had to be smart. Had to give him something cool. I'd have to look up about the dodo. I don't know a ton about the dodo actually, beyond the fact that it was just flightless and dumb and overly big, and that's what kind of just made it super easy to murder. Like it's like an animal that came from a nicer time. It wasn't prepared for how savage modern humans were. This is actually, and then there's a lot of cool animals. Like the aardwolf is pretty awesome too. It's a super cute, cuddly wolf-looking type dog. It's very distinctive looking. It's pretty dope. It's pretty dope. Yeah, 1681. Never stood a chance, man. Never stood a chance. Because we were just like, oh, we had guns and we were just like shooting everything. And kid with a toy, we like could not stop. Let's see. Let's read another one of these creatures from the creature creator. This mood is vibrant. And oh god, I'm not gonna be able to say this name. Vavumduga. It has 6 eyes. It's pale white and it's serpentine. It has magical eyes, intelligence, and extendable tentacles. People like these tentacles, bro. I'm not gonna say nothing. Next one is, oh boy, I'm gonna have to learn how to. I'm gonna send some messages to people to figure out how they want their names pronounced on their creatures, because I do not know how to pronounce some of these. This one is Hypterin? Hypteratium? Carpatium. Carpatium? Yeah, sure. Body of a black lion, head of an androgynous human. Feathers covering the front of the chest. Over covered in the fashion of an eye's shoulders. I don't know that word. I'm gonna have to look that up. And down its back, forming into two great wings. And down the crest of its tail, the feather African bird called the lilac-breasted roller. Oh, based on that. Interesting. That's cool though. Body of a black lion, head of an androgynous human. It's freakish. It's like a reverse. No, not a reverse. What is the other one? It's head of a human, body of not like a centaur. It's another one like that. Can't think of it. Anyway. Benevolent, but will defend itself if attacked. Either created by or exist in the service of some deity in protection of a people, land, or relic. It's always interesting seeing the people's imaginations, seeing what they come up with, because it's like some weird, crazy stuff sometimes. The only thing I've heard about them is they were a smaller version of an ostrich, so they could take a lot of freedom if they were. That's true. They were like the ostrich's dumber, uglier cousin. The one who's always getting into trouble. This next one is Draxus Rex, the Pixie Cat Dragon. Oh shit. Pixie Cat Dragon. Okay. Think dragons if they were cats. Inspired by the Devon Rex breed. Fur coat, feather wings, big eyes, and ears. Mischievous, curious, intelligent omens of good. What is a deviant Rex? I have never even... that kind of cat. Interesting. Huh. I guess that would be an interesting one. Okay. It's a bit of a curveball, but I'm down to try. Alright. Anybody have any questions? I think we're nearing the end of this one. I'm gonna try to keep them under like 2 hours from now on. Lately we've been 3 and it's been like messed the whole day up. It was fun to talk about creatures. I love this kind of shit. I love doing like things that are just slightly different enough to be like, oh man, that's a cool, random, weird idea. So, legit. Alright, let's hear them questions. Anything you got toward the end of the stream? Weird ideas do inspire. They really do. They really like test your ability to plus I feel like it's a nice exercise for your brain just when it gets to go random idea just shoots it at your butt and you're like, well, that was random and weird, and that's what makes it so much fun. Oh my god, I have so many emails I have to. The work always continues, which I don't mind. It's just like I feel attacked. I love people on Twitter and shit, cracks me up. Alright, I think we're getting to the end. Maybe, do I need to adjust my stream time? It feels like I'm either just a little bit too late or just a little bit too early for people. So being on the West Coast, hashtag life. No? Okay. Tuesday Tacos. Also, by the way, if you haven't seen, the shirt. Just gonna say, looks pretty schmeck-shammy, if I do say so myself. So, I know V, I know you bought a bunch of stuff, so you're good. Sorry. I think that's what I'm gonna do for this Tuesday. Thank everybody for coming out. What am I up to this week? Pretty much, man, nothing for public consumption, honestly, unfortunately. A bunch of stuff behind the scenes, some writing that you won't see until I finish editing, or that if you're a Patreon member, you'll get to see a ton of concept art that we have coming out right now, man. Timo's really going through that creative process. Sabina's working on some Garuda landscape. Jonah's just about to get started on the first dragon. So if you're a Patreon member, you'll get to see all the stuff before you finally get to see the finished piece, which everyone gets to see. So, no. Other than that, all right, peeps. What is this? I felt like I might come up with a saying, but it's weird coming up with the saying because it's like, do you sit there and write a paper down and you finally come up with one? You're like, yeah. Instead, I will do like I do normally and be like, have a good Tuesday, eat some tacos, write some stuff, and we will see you on Tikor. Deuces.